Morning everybody, it's Nick. Sorry, slightly croaky as you can hear. I wanted to talk today about dying and the process of dying, and I wanted to just share some very tangible information and guidance, if I may, that I hope can be of help to people. So I'm a soul midwife in the way that a midwife helps a soul into this world, a soul midwife helps a soul depart this world. And as we labour to bring a soul into the world, we also labour when a soul departs the world. And there are different stages, actually 5 different stages from a soul midwifery perspective. The first is earth, the second is water, third is fire, fourth is air, and the fifth is an ethereal, more spiritual stage, which is after death, and very much is about the spirit and the soul unwinding from each other. I'm not sure if that's the right way, but the real focus that I'd like to talk about are the first 4 elements, because I think it's quite important, and what I've observed with the work I do with families is that understanding how to see where your loved one is in these stages and what they need and what happens can help you as a family make the very best of your time. I'm also in this vlog going to talk about actually what dying looks like and what happens. So if anybody is not ready to hear this, please don't worry, just don't listen to it or stop at any point. And for those of you who may want a more eloquent description, I would strongly advise watching Dr. Catherine Mannix on TED, on her TED Talks, and she also talks about this process. So the different elements. Earth is the first and can be the longest element. It can last several years, and indeed the research is showing that I think it's something like 1 in 8 of us will now die of fragility, and the more acute diseases such as the cancers of the world actually will probably be more prevalent in younger people. So once you're over 80, the likelihood is you're going to die from fragility. Now there is a fragility scale, but the bottom line is, for me, I interpret fragility as effectively we die of old age, and as we get older, our bodies get older, things don't work as well, things start to break, things don't start to mend as well, and that results in death at the end. But it does very much change really our focus, I think, from a personal perspective, on palliative care, because palliative care is about living as well as you can with the life-limiting conditions you have. And I think palliative care is no longer going to be, we've got this culture of thinking it's palliative care, that means I'm going to die relatively shortly. Well, actually, if a lot of us are going to die of fragility, we may need to access palliative care far earlier in order to give us a quality of life for far longer, because it might be several years. So when somebody is in earth, what's happening is earth is very much about our physicality. It's very grounding. So as that element withdraws, and this is what happens during the process of death, each of the elements I've talked about actually withdraw. As an aside, in our everyday life, our normal life, those elements are constantly present in us. We constantly have earth, water, fire and air, but it's more circular. It keeps going, it replenishes, they don't withdraw. Have you had those days where you're just raging, particularly anybody like me? I am 52 years old, I am experiencing a menopause. I do find it challenging, and some days I really am in fire. I am raging, and you know what, go girl, let yourself rage, let it out. It needs to go somewhere. A fire stops burning when it's burnt everything there is to burn, right? But so back to where we are on death. But when we are dying, the process of death, each of these phases, the elements are withdrawing. So when earth is withdrawing, what we will notice is that our physical body is affected. We may have less energy, we may not be as mobile, we may lose some of our muscle mass, we may start to change not only the volume of food that we need, but we might not start to want certain stuff because our digestive system is changing too. It's slowing down, and therefore Our body always talks to us. Our body's really clever and talks to us. So if it tells us it doesn't fancy that food, it doesn't fancy it for a reason, it may be simply that our digestive system's going to go, ooh, yeah, that's going to take a little bit more time and energy than I can cope with. So we have less energy, we are more tired, you might start to see muscle wastage, we might start to have mobility issues, digestive issues, very, very physical. And as that element withdraws, that can take a long time. I mean, it can take several years. And I think we are seeing more and more of that, particularly if we are actually dying predominantly of fragility. This is a biggie. And and the big thing actually is if your loved one is in earth, anything you want to do, if you've got stuff on the bucket list and you want to go to the seaside for the day, you want to go out and see the trees, you want to go to a particular tea shop, whatever it is you want to do, my advice as a soul midwife was do as much as that as is physically possible, as early as possible in earth, because as you get towards the end of earth, it will become more and more difficult. Mobility will become more and more difficult, having the energy will become more and more difficult. It will just become more painful to actually do things. You know, walking around the corner will all become, you know, the comparison will be like running a marathon as you go through this stage. So absolutely make the most of earth in terms of, you know, doing and being together. As that earth withdraws, we then enter what we call the water stage. Now, as you might imagine, the water stage is very much about emotions and reflections. And this is often a time where I think it's a beautiful time for talking. And this is where the really deep conversations need to happen. We all pick up soul wounds as we go through life. Some of them are deeper than others. We have beautiful memories, we have bad memories, we have joy, we have love, we have loss, we have sadness, we have a whole array of things that makes it's an integral, primal part of being a human being. And one of the things that I have found is hugely therapeutic for the person who is dying, for the loved ones, but also for me as a soul midwife wanting to support my friend, is to really support our friends to replay that beautiful movie of their life, but not just the good bits, all of it. And in actual fact, the bits that need the most care, the most love, the most tenderness are the bits that perhaps haven't been resolved, have been very hurtful. There might be regrets, whatever they are, and that can take time. And the water stage is nowhere near as long as the earth stage. You're not talking years by any stretch of the imagination. If you're getting into the water stage, you know, my observation is weeks, possibly months. I mean, you know, it's really difficult to give times because Mother Nature, I tell you what, Mother Nature moves to the beat of Mother Nature. And one thing I have learned as a soul midwife is I will never get the timing right, because Mother Nature always makes that decision. But it is significantly less and shorter than the earth stage. I think that's a good principle. So if you're going into the water stage, always treat every day as the day. Seize the day, have the conversations, go through, tell the stories, share the stories, deal with the soul wounds, open that space if you can. It's very difficult, I know, particularly when we love, you know, we so love our loved ones, and it's so hard to face the fact that we are coming to the end of the journey as we know it in this life. And let's face it, none of us know what's beyond this life. Listen to my croaky voice. We don't know what is beyond this life. We don't know if it's a nothingness or something beautiful. We just don't. So I'm erring on the side of it being something beautiful because I want to be an optimist. It's a personal choice. Have those conversations. Say the things you need to say, and allow the person you love to say the things that they need to say. Because one of the most beautiful gifts we can give to our loved ones when they are dying is to help them to reach a place of acceptance. Acceptance that this is going to happen. When we're in the earth stage, that can be quite difficult, because when we're in the earth stage, we're still mobile, we're still eating, we're still physical, we're still pretty much operating as a human being, albeit we're slowing down and things are slowly starting to come to a halt in the physical world. And so therefore it's quite difficult psychologically to go, yeah, I can accept the fact I'm dying, because actually it doesn't really feel like we're dying. It feels like we're getting old and things are breaking, but it doesn't really feel like we're dying. Not from my observation, because actually we're still doing all the stuff that human beings do, even if it's slower. Yeah, we're still eating a meal, we're still going to the toilet, we're perhaps still walking around, even if it's with a walking aid. But I think when you get into water, that's the real opportunity. The water stage is, to me, the really big opportunity to open for a person who is facing imminent death to open it up as much as they're able. And our job, certainly as a soul midwife, is always to meet our friends wherever we are. It is not up to us to push, pull, judge. It's none of that. It is to create the space, to create enough space for the person to be able to reflect on their life and their mortality as much as they want. And our job is then to expand that space as the person who is going through the process of death needs it to be expanded, and to do so in a way which is really, really safe. So even though that path ahead might look dark and is not lit, they can walk down it and we can hold their hand and they don't feel afraid. That's really important. But as your family and loved ones, it's really important. I so want to say, please, please, please use this time to talk. Whatever it is you want to say it now. And it's okay for you to cry, and it's okay for your loved ones to cry, and it's okay for those tears to be intermingled, because it is sad and loss is coming our way. And you know what we let out, that doesn't hurt us. It doesn't fester and go toxic. What we let in, what we keep in, does. So that's why I think water is so important. And for me as a soul midwife, I would say that's where most of my work is done. And most of my work, I heard this wonderful saying yesterday at a conference, and it really resonated, because I thought that is what we do, is most of my work when a friend is in the water stage is actually being a listener and actually being pretty powerless. And actually the act of doing nothing and being powerless and silence, the act of just being quiet and listening and just giving our friends the time to process and build trust with us and to be able to go where they want is beautiful. But it's very, very difficult to do. And I think we perhaps ought to practice it with ourselves. Can we sit in silence with ourselves? Can we just sit in that silence, in that discomfort with ourselves, and then perhaps can we journal and let it out? But yeah, the water stage is really important, and my massive, massive biggest tip is have the conversations. Have the conversations. If you're the person on the process of death, please find a safe space, find a safe person, whether that be your family, a loved one, a friend, a soul midwife, whoever. Go where you need to go. Explore it all. Because I think that the psychological cleansing, reflection, detox, whatever words you want to use, is a fundamental part of having a good death. And from water comes fire, which, as you can imagine, can be really intense. Very often in the medical world we'll see that as sorry, something just caught my eye there, terminal agitation. And it's very fiery. People can be really agitated, they can be angry. You know, this is where the unfairness, not just of the fact that they are dying, but maybe lots of unfairness and hurts and injustices that have happened in their life. They can lash out, shout, rage. It can also be a time of great excitement. You know, there's a lot of energy. And sometimes they think, oh, they've rallied round. They've rallied round. You know, everything's going to be okay. Actually, it's the fire stage. And in a way, everything is going to be okay, because this is a natural stage of the death process. But death is still coming. And the thing I always say is, you know, a fire stops burning when it has burnt everything there is to burn. As a soul midwife, my role there is just simply to be able to hold the space. It's always to be able to hold the space and to make sure our friends have the permission and know they have that permission. Nothing is off limits. Anything they want to spurt out of their mouth, wants to get out, get it out there. And actually, it's a good principle in life, actually. Get out in your garden and rage. Rage! Get it out, let it go. You know, it is a basic law of physics. We cannot destroy nor create the energy, but we can change form. And there is something that happens when we allow that out of ourselves. Now, terminal agitation can be very, very, very distressing for the family to see. But what I've observed is very often what we see as agitation and angst for our friends who are dying may not be what they're experiencing. There might be a disconnect between the two. And the best advice I was ever given from a GP was to check their pulse, because if somebody is generally stressed, is genuinely in pain, their pulse will be racing. So, you know, that's something that I really, really hold dear to, and keep a very open mind about what is going on there. And from fire we go to air, and air is a very ethereal stage. Air is pretty much where our loved ones are going to be unconscious for longer and longer and longer. The human brain doesn't differentiate between being unconscious and being asleep, so even if our friends have been unconscious, they may come back and say, oh, I've had a lovely sleep, and then they'll go back off again. And this is what will happen for more and more periods of time. And the last part of our human anatomy to actually close down during the process of death is the brain stem that controls our respiratory system. And so what eventually, you know, dying people don't need to eat. They may need a little bit of, might be discomfort in terms of liquids and so forth, but you have to remember our human form is withdrawing. So you know, people don't die because they're not eating. People aren't eating because they're dying. And eventually, you know, that last breath out will come, and another one will just not be taken in. And it is like that. It is predominantly like that. And that will be the process of death. And they are the stages that we go through. Now, there are exceptional deaths that I have seen that haven't followed that pattern, and I would say have perhaps died in a different stage. And that's one of the things that I'm very interested in as to what stops people moving through stages. Because in order to have that ethereal, peaceful death, I think it's really important that we support everybody to get through the stages. I think when people get stuck in a stage, that's when we can prolong the suffering of the person who's dying. So let's not let's not intervene in the wrong way, is the best way I think I can put it. So let's not close people down if they're needing to cry and tell their story. Let's not you know, berate people if they're shouting at us and they need to burn their fire, because it's really, really, really important to allow there to be movement through the stages. In the same way we have movement and we go through the stages of birth, we need to go through the stages of death. And I just wanted to do this vlog to try and bring some, I suppose, reality and tangible things to people so that you can understand what's happening when your loved one is going through the process of death. But pretty much as we leave the fire stage and go into air, your loved one will still be there. They will still be able to hear you, maybe squeeze hands. You will maybe still get the odd few words, but you're probably not going to get long in-depth conversations. So please have them earlier. Please have them earlier. And when your loved one is in air, please, you know, do keep telling them that you love them. Remember that they are there and they can hear you. Perhaps don't be too loud. Perhaps don't have lights too bright. Remember that they're having to detach from this human world and go wherever it is that we go. So it's just a very ethereal, tranquil stage. Holding hands, the sense of touch. Again, not too heavy, not too hard. Everything's about being gentle, tranquil, ethereal, and just allow them to go quietly into the night, my friend. I hope that's of help to someone somewhere. Lots of love.